Ethan Vance, a young, talented, cold CEO who has just taken over a huge industrial empire after the death of his father, and Serafina Bellwether, 32 years old, the second wife, beautiful, intelligent, and young of that same late father. Yes, she used to be his stepmother. After the father-husband passed away, the legal constraints finally forced them to meet again. From the initial awkwardness and distance, a dangerous connection, an inexplicable attraction began to arise between them. This is not the usual love at first sight. This is a feeling condemned by both society and conscience, haunted by the ghost of the past and the image of the deceased. Is this a sympathy between two lonely souls facing the same loss, or is it a double betrayal? Betraying the deceased father and betraying all moral standards. What happens when this sinful love affair is exposed by the powerful Vance family and high society? Is love strong enough to withstand the anger, disgust, and risk of losing everything? Reputation, career, family? The most complex psychological corner where love and sin intertwine. If you don't mind a dramatic, sensitive, and inevitably divisive story, then join me in turning the pages of this book. 3 years have passed since Arthur Vance, the titan of industry, died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving behind a multi-industry empire and a huge power vacuum. Now sitting behind the polished walnut desk in the CEO office of Vance Industries is Ethan Vance, his son, the reluctant heir. In his 30s, he has proven himself to be more than just his father's shadow, with a sharp mind and a somewhat cold determination. Ethan has steadily steered the corporation through a turbulent transition. He is efficient, he is talented, but there is something distant and heavy about him. The pressure to maintain the legacy of his father, with whom he had a complicated relationship, combined with the solitude of his luxurious but cold penthouse, seems to have etched itself into his blue eyes, deep, usually focused on numbers and charts. His memories of his father were conflicted, a powerful, ambitious man, but also patriarchal and distant. And his memories of Serafina Bellwether, his father's young second wife, were even more complicated. Ethan still remembered the discomfort, the vague skepticism when his father, then in his 60s, married a woman only a few years older than him. He had always kept his distance, coldly polite, secretly viewing her as a pretty opportunist, a flashy but insubstantial addition to his father's already complicated life. Now at 32, Serafina was a widow. Serafina Bellwether, after Arthur's death, had quietly withdrawn from the glamorous world of the Vance family, trying to rebuild a separate, independent life. She used part of her inheritance, a small sum but enough to start over, according to the strict terms of Arthur's will, to open a small art gallery in Chelsea where she could pursue her true passion. Her beauty was now more mature, and her amber eyes still held an indescribable sadness, a trace of the years of loneliness and judgment at the Vance mansion. Her marriage to Arthur, while bringing material stability, lacked the warmth and understanding she had always craved. Fate, or rather the final legal constraints, had forced Ethan and Serafina to meet again. There were still some lingering issues regarding the division of Arthur's personal assets, the art objects he and Serafina had collected together, which required the consent of both primary heirs. The meeting was arranged at the lawyer's office, a neutral space that still couldn't erase the awkwardness and tension between them. Ethan arrived on time, still in his neat business suit, his face expressionless. He nodded politely to Serafina. She returned a polite but distant smile. They sat across the long conference table, and the lawyer began to present the terms. Arthur Vance's shadow still seemed to hang over the room, making the atmosphere heavy. The past relationship between stepmother and stepchild created an invisible, thorny wall. The meeting proceeded professionally and dryly until the lawyer mentioned a small collection of abstract paintings that Arthur loved. "According to the will, this collection belongs to the two of you," the lawyer explained. "You can choose to divide it in half, sell it and split the money, or one of you can keep it and compensate the other." Ethan, who had never really cared for abstract art, was about to say that it would be quicker to sell it, but Serafina spoke first, her voice soft but knowing. "I don't think your father would want this collection to be torn apart or sold, Ethan. He put a lot of effort into collecting them, and each painting has its own story, reflecting a period of his life." She paused, looking directly at Ethan. "Maybe you should keep them. They're a part of his memory, complicated but still worth cherishing." Ethan was stunned. He had never heard Serafina speak of his father that way, a subtle understanding that went beyond the material value. He was also surprised by her knowledge of art, something he had never noticed when she was Mrs. Vance. Her words were not meant to be argumentative or demanding, simply a sincere suggestion touching on some hidden corner of his complicated relationship with his father. I'll think about it," Ethan replied, his voice losing its usual coldness. For the first time during the meeting, he looked at Serafina more closely. She was no longer the beautiful young girl who had seemed out of place at lavish parties. She had become an independent, intelligent woman with depth and an elegant sadness that made him suddenly curious. The meeting ended on a less tense note than it had begun. When they walked out of the law office together, a light rain was falling over New York. Serafina opened her small umbrella. Ethan, who always had a driver waiting for him, found himself hesitant. "Let me take you home," he offered, an offer that was unexpected even to him. Serafina was taken aback, but then she shook her head slightly, smiling. "Thanks, Ethan, but I can get home. My gallery is not far." She nodded to him again and quickly joined the crowd on the wet sidewalk. Ethan watched her figure disappear into the rain. The initial awkwardness had given way to a strange feeling, a curiosity, and perhaps a vague attraction towards the woman who had once been his stepmother. The door to the past that had seemed closed now seemed to be opening, leading to a path filled with complicated and dangerous emotions. The meeting at the law office had planted in Ethan a lingering curiosity about Serafina. He couldn't stop thinking about her change, about the intelligence and depth he had never noticed before. He decided to keep his father's abstract painting collection, just as she had advised, and then, under the pretext of needing advice on how to arrange and preserve them, he took the initiative to contact Serafina, inviting her to his apartment. Serafina was a bit hesitant at first. Returning to the penthouse where she had lived with Arthur, a place that contained too many complicated memories and hidden judgmental eyes, was not an easy thing to do. But her curiosity about Ethan, about the real person behind his cold appearance, along with the sincerity of the invitation, and perhaps a little bit of her own loneliness, made her agree. The meeting at Ethan's apartment took place in a completely different atmosphere from the last time. There was no longer the presence of lawyers or dry legal documents. They walked around the large apartment, talking about the paintings, about what they meant to Arthur and to themselves. Serafina shared her deep understanding of art, about how each work reflected the artist's mood. Ethan listened attentively. For the first time, he really looked at the paintings that he had previously considered expensive decorations. He also shared his thoughts, his own feelings, although still awkward but sincere. The conversation gradually expanded to other topics. They talked about New York, about their favorite corners, about the books they were reading, about the pressures of work and life. Ethan discovered a humorous, sophisticated, compassionate Serafina, a free spirit who loved art. He realized that he had been completely wrong to judge her only by her appearance or previous circumstances. He was attracted by her intelligence, warmth, and increasingly attractive beauty. Serafina also saw a completely different Ethan, no longer the stubborn son who always showed confrontation with his father and was cold towards her. He was a young man burdened with enormous responsibility, intelligent, idealistic, but also full of unspoken hurt and loneliness. She felt sympathy for him, and that sympathy gradually crept into another emotion, an attraction that she knew was wrong, dangerous. The meetings became more frequent, sometimes at Serafina's gallery, sometimes at quiet cafes or at concerts they both loved. They tried to keep things within the bounds of friendship, but the attraction between them became increasingly obvious. Their eyes searched each other's, their touches lingered a little longer, their smiles held more than just the usual friendliness. There was an undercurrent of tension between them, a fierce current that was just waiting to explode. Guilt became a haunting ghost for both of them. Whenever they were together, the image of Arthur Vance appeared, a reminder of the line that could not be crossed. Ethan felt he was betraying his father in the worst way, loving the woman who had been his wife. Serafina feels she is going against all moral standards, tainting the memory of her late husband who gave her a stable, albeit emotionally incomplete life. They try to fight that attraction. Ethan throws himself into work to the point of exhaustion. Serafina tries to focus on developing the gallery. They even try to date other people, but the images and feelings for each other become more clear and strong. The attempt to deny only makes the feelings deeper, more dangerous. Sympathy and loss, ironically, becomes the final catalyst. On the first anniversary of Arthur's death, both Ethan and Serafina feel a sense of sadness and loneliness. Ethan, who has never shown his emotions, finds himself driving unconsciously near Serafina's gallery. He sees her sitting alone inside, her eyes staring out the window. He enters. They didn't say much, just sat silently together, sharing a complicated sadness that no one else could understand. That silence held a connection deeper than 1,000 words. In that moment of weakness and empathy, the last wall of defense collapsed. The empathy and loneliness of Arthur's death anniversary became the final catalyst pushing Ethan and Serafina over the line they had both tried so hard to maintain. That evening, when Ethan drove Serafina back to her apartment, the silence in the car was no longer awkward but the tension of pent-up emotions. When the car stopped, neither wanted to be the first to get out. "Thank you for being there for me today, Ethan," Serafina said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "I needed you too," Ethan replied, turning to look at her, his eyes filled with something deep and intense. In that moment, all reason, all guilt, all fear of the past and the future seemed to melt away. There were only two lonely people left, longing for connection, drawn into an irresistible attraction. Ethan leaned forward and Serafina closed her eyes. Their lips found each other in a slow, passionate kiss, a kiss that released all the pent-up emotions, filled with both passion and guilt. That kiss was the beginning of a secret love affair full of danger and torment. They knew it was wrong, against all norms, a betrayal of the deceased, but they couldn't stop. The desire to be together, to share, to find the harmony they had been lacking for so long, was too great. The meetings became more furtive. Late nights at Serafina's gallery after the staff had all gone home, weekend trips to quiet small towns far from New York where no one knows who they are, secret texts and phone calls. Every moment together is sweet but also tinged with guilt and fear. The secret weighs heavily on their minds. Ethan becomes more irritable at work. His concentration begins to suffer. He longs to see Serafina, but is also afraid that if this relationship is exposed, it will destroy everything he has. Serafina also lives in constant insecurity. She is happy to find love and understanding in Ethan, but also tormented by her conscience every time she thinks of Arthur and the Vance family. No matter how hard they try to hide it, the signs of abnormality begin to be noticed by those around them. Elelena Vance, Ethan's mother, Arthur's first wife, a shrewd woman who is always wary of Serafina, notices the change in her son's attitude. He seemed more alive, but also more mysterious and distant. She began to notice Ethan's long private phone calls and unexplained weekend trips. Ethan's close assistant also noticed that his boss had more secret appointments and mood swings than before. The ghosts of the past are always present. Sometimes during intimate moments, one of them accidentally mentions Arthur, and the atmosphere immediately becomes heavy and full of guilt. They try to avoid talking about him, but the silence only emphasizes the taboo nature of the relationship. The tension and guilt sometimes turn into hidden arguments, unreasonable sulks, gradually eroding the initial romance. They are trapped in a spiral of passion, guilt, and fear, not knowing how to escape. The veil of secrecy is finally torn away, not by Ethan or Serafina's carelessness, but by an unexpected event that exposes their forbidden love to the most brutal public light. A paparazzi, while following another celebrity, accidentally captured Ethan and Serafina kissing passionately outside a small, discreet restaurant on the outskirts of the city. The photo, with the sensational headline, Vance Industries CEO and widowed stepmother, shocking incestuous romance, was quickly posted to an online tabloid and went viral. It was a real bombshell. The entire New York high society world was shaken. The prestigious Vance family became the center of a terrible ethics scandal. Ethan's phone rang constantly. His emails were flooded with criticism and outrage. Business partners began to show their weariness. Vance Industries' stock price plummeted. The biggest anger came from the Vance family itself. Ethan's mother, Elelena Vance, who had always held a grudge against Serafina, felt humiliated and deeply hurt. She could not accept that her son would have a relationship with the woman who was her husband's ex-wife, whom she had always considered a pagan. Other members of the family, who always placed great importance on honor and tradition, also strongly condemned Ethan's actions, considering it a disgrace to the family's reputation and unforgivable insult to their deceased father. They put enormous pressure on Ethan, demanding that he immediately end this disgraceful relationship, publicly apologize, and do everything possible to save the family's image, or he would lose everything: the CEO position, the inheritance, and even the family's recognition. Serafina became the target of attacks from all sides. She was branded by public opinion with the worst names: a shameless gold digger, a woman who seduced her husband's stepchild. Her small art gallery was boycotted, and her former social friends turned their backs on her. The Vance family cuts off all remaining ties, even threatening to use the law to strip her of her last rights from Arthur's will. She is completely isolated, facing the cruel judgment of society and the ultimate pain. In the eye of the storm, Ethan and Serafina are forced to face the naked truth and make the most difficult choice of their lives. Their love, already fragile because of guilt and secrecy, is now tested by the fury of the outside world. Is it strong enough to survive? Ethan is at a crossroads. On one side is the family legacy, a lifelong career, the recognition of family and society. On the other side is Serafina, the woman he loves, who brings him the connection and meaning he has always sought, but is also the source of all his troubles and condemnation. He spends many sleepless nights torn between duty and love, between reason and heart. He knows that any choice will come with loss and pain. Serafina also faces her own choice. She loves Ethan, but can she continue to endure this torment and judgment to be with him? Will their love truly bring happiness or just mutual destruction? Or should she give up, disappear from his life, and seek another peace, even if it is lonely? After months of living in hell on earth, Ethan makes a final decision, a decision that surprises many people. He resigns as CEO of Vance Industries, handing over the management to another trusted person on the board. He accepts to give up most of his huge inheritance, keeping only a portion of the fortune, enough to start over. He publicly declares that he chooses love and his personal life over status and family pressure. He doesn't apologize for loving Serafina, only for the pain their relationship caused those involved. Then he went to find Serafina, who was living quietly in the gallery, trying to withstand the storm of public opinion. He didn't say much, just held out his hand. "Come with me, Sarah," he asked, his eyes filled with love, determination, and a little tiredness after the war. "We'll start over somewhere else where there are no ghosts of the past or judgment, just you and me." Serafina looked at him, tears welling up in her eyes. She saw his sacrifice, his courage, and his unconditional love. She knew that the road ahead would not be easy, that they would face many difficulties, but as long as he was by her side, she could do it. She nodded, placing her hand in his. They left New York, leaving behind the glamorous but prejudiced and pressured upper-class world. They chose a smaller, more peaceful city to start over. Ethan used his business knowledge to advise local businesses. Serafina continues to work in her small art studio, where she is free to create and find peace. Their life is much simpler without the power or wealth, but filled with understanding, love, and the freedom to be themselves. The price of their forbidden love is high. The scars from the past will never completely disappear, but they choose to stay together, face the consequences, and build a new future based on true love. They have proven that sometimes the strongest love arises from the most complicated and painful circumstances, and that the courageous choice to follow your heart, no matter the cost, is the path to salvation and true happiness. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you like this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more meaningful stories.